What happened inside AT&T Stadium on the second night of BTS's Arlington stop was more than just another concert. On August 16th, BTS returned to the stage for the second of 2 nights in Arlington, Texas, as part of the ARIRANG World Tour. The Texas shows were already significant because they marked BTS's return to North Texas as a full group after their long hiatus. But by the time day 2 arrived, it felt like something much bigger was happening. From the moment fans began filling the stadium, the atmosphere was impossible to ignore. ARMY arrived from different cities and even different states, turning the area around AT&T Stadium into a sea of excitement long before the members appeared. Fan reports described crowded lines, packed entrances, merchandise selling quickly, and an atmosphere that became increasingly intense as showtime approached. And then the lights went down. Suddenly, thousands of conversations disappeared beneath a massive roar. The scale of the venue made the opening moments feel almost unreal. AT&T Stadium was not simply hosting BTS that night. It had become a giant meeting point for fans who had waited years to see all 7 members standing on the same stage again. That context matters. BTS's 2026 return was not just another tour cycle. The ARIRANG era represented a major new chapter for the group, following their military service hiatus and the release of their new album. The tour itself was announced as one of the biggest global campaigns of their career, taking the group through stadiums across multiple continents. So when the members appeared in Arlington, there was already an emotional weight behind the performance. But day 2 quickly proved that the night would not be defined only by nostalgia. The members looked completely locked into the performance. And Jungkook, in particular, continued to attract attention with a combination of his vocals, movement, and effortless stage presence. Rather than relying only on dramatic choreography, he seemed to understand exactly when to push forward and when to let the crowd take over. That became one of the most memorable parts of the night. The audience was not simply watching BTS. They were participating. Every chant, every scream, every light in the stadium added another layer to the performance. At certain moments, the distinction between performer and audience almost disappeared. BTS would give the crowd energy, ARMY would send it straight back, and the members would respond by pushing even harder. That feedback loop is one of the reasons BTS stadium concerts feel so different from ordinary shows. And there was another detail that made Arlington Day 2 especially interesting. The ARIRANG tour was built around a massive 360-degree stage concept, designed to make the performance feel immersive from virtually every part of the stadium. The production combined newer ARIRANG material with major songs from BTS's catalog, including songs such as Idol, Butter, Dynamite, and Run BTS. That meant there was almost never a quiet moment. One song could create an emotional atmosphere, and minutes later the entire stadium could be jumping again. The contrast worked because BTS understood the rhythm of the audience. They knew when to slow things down. They knew when to let ARMY sing. And they knew exactly when to unleash the kind of performance that turns a stadium into controlled chaos. But perhaps the most interesting part was how quickly the night began to feel personal. For fans who had followed BTS for years, seeing the 7 members together again carried a significance that went far beyond the music itself. There were years of waiting behind that moment, years of solo projects, years of military service, years of wondering what the next full group era would actually look like. Now, standing inside one of the biggest stadiums in Texas, the answer was right in front of them. BTS was back, and Arlington was becoming another chapter in that comeback story. Even the small moments mattered. A smile toward the audience, a reaction to an especially loud section, a member laughing during a transition, a spontaneous interaction that was never going to appear exactly the same way again. Those moments can disappear in an official recording, but for the people inside the stadium, they become memories. And that may explain why Day 2 felt so emotional as the concert moved toward its final stretch. The louder the audience became, the more obvious it was that the night was running out of time. The stadium that had been filled with anticipation was now filled with something completely different. The realization that this particular night would never happen again. BTS had already performed in North Texas before. They had appeared in the Dallas area back in 2015, and a planned 2020 appearance had ultimately been canceled during the pandemic. Now, More than a decade after that earlier Texas chapter began, the group had returned to AT&T Stadium for 2 massive nights. That history made the final moments hit even harder. Because this was not simply the end of a concert, it was the end of BTS's Arlington chapter on the ARIRANG tour. And when the final performances came, the members did not look like they wanted to rush through them. They gave the audience one more reason to stay completely focused, one more reason to sing, one more reason to scream, and one more reason to remember exactly where they were when the lights finally came back on. The most powerful part of the night may not have been a particular dance move or vocal moment. It was the connection. Thousands of people who had never met each other were suddenly singing the same songs, carrying the same excitement, and experiencing the same moment together. That is what BTS has always been unusually good at creating. Not simply a concert, a shared experience. And when Day 2 in Arlington finally came to an end, the stadium was left with the feeling that something important had just happened. The lights could come back on. The stage could eventually be cleared. The crowd could begin making its way home. But for the ARMY who were there, the night would remain much longer than the final note. Because Arlington did not just witness BTS perform. It witnessed 7 members stepping into a new era together and reminding everyone why, after all these years, a BTS stadium night can still feel completely impossible to replace.